Hi, I'm Bo Turner, Product Manager for Clarity from IMAGINiT Technologies, and I'm here to talk with you about our newest release, 2014.1. Revit's a powerful tool for designing projects and creating models, but not every project stakeholder has access to Revit or has the skills needed to use the system. What if there was a better way to keep project stakeholders informed about the projects and be able to automate the work? And that's where IMAGINiT Clarity steps in. IMAGINiT Clarity starts off with the base product, and this is a tool set that runs in conjunction with Autodesk Revit. It's accessible using a browser, and you can provide things like task automation, cut sheets, project reporting, dashboard, and more. If you're not familiar with what these terms are, I'll cover these as we go along. The other thing is our Clarity Connect product, and this allows you to take the features that we just talked about, and it builds and extends on top of Revit Server to provide model sharing and collaboration for multi-office, multi-firm, and provide secure project level access. So let's talk about that term automation. When you're working on a project, there's a lot of manual tasks to do besides designing the building, the systems, or the structure. This includes specialized deliverables, prints, exports, data sharing, cut sheet generation, and a lot more. Some of the options that you may be doing today for automation are things like just manually doing this task one time every single time you need to do that. You may be able to have other people to be able to start helping, assisting with that workload, things like interns or having project managers be involved with that. You may start getting into light programming where you're doing things like journal files, being able to run those, maybe doing Python scripting, or taking advantage of the robust Revit API. And you may also be using a tool called Model Review. Now, the methods vary based on the actual type of task that needs to be done. So Albert Einstein defined this best when he said the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. And when I look at things like printing a large sheet set, if I have something like that that's going to take 2 hours to do, and if you're manually invoking that task, it ties up your machine and you can never get that time back or be able to work on other more meaningful parts to your project. And by being able to automate that, it lets you focus on pressing items within the project and allows you to do things like generating some of your deliverables automatically and ultimately freeing your time to be able to do more. Some of the tasks that Clarity offers are things like being able to back up your projects, generating DGN files, DWF, DWG, doing FBX, GBXML, and IFC exports, being able to run model review, generate Navisworks NWC files, being able to generate PDF files, take advantage of the Performance Advisor report within Revit, as well as exporting the database, images, and room information inside of there. And you can do these tasks in any one of three ways. It can be automatic, which means anytime you or your users synchronize to Central, it can kick off and run these tasks. It can also do it timed. So every day of the week you want to run something at 4 a.m. or maybe just Tuesdays and Thursdays you want to run updated PDFs. And maybe on Friday at 6 o'clock in the evening you want to back up the projects in the office there. Well, you can do those right with the task. And I'll show a little bit more about this as we go along. The third option is you can do these on demand, just when you need this. Now the way this piece works is we take advantage of using Revit. We've got a license of Revit. The users themselves continue to work. You're still going to link models in. You're still going to have architectural models, interior, structure, MEP, and more to be able to go with your project. What Clarity does is it runs one task, which we call the Clarity DB task, and that's the database task, and it allows us to be able to take that information and push it up to where Clarity is hosted at. From this, we can do things like looking at the data, getting more meaningful information. We can generate schedules, look at room layouts, generate PDFs, DWF, DWG, IFC, and several more of those tasks like we just talked about a moment ago. Now, when I talk about tasks, I want to explain a little bit about what a task server is. And the idea is that if you had a single task server, you could really just kind of run one task at a time. And ultimately, there's a queue. So as you're starting to work, things are going to drop down in the queue. The tasks themselves are going to run. And when that one is completed, the next one's going to drop down into the queue and continue on. So here we generated a PDF, we generated a Navisworks file, now we've generated a DGN file, and now we've got a GWF file that's being generated. Well, this is still way faster than doing this piece manually and tying up your machine, because where Clarity is installed at, that's where it's being processed. So it's on your server, whether that's in the cloud or just to the server of the machine down the hall or a virtual machine that you have installed on site, ultimately freeing up your desktop. Now, when we talk about multiple task servers, this is where you really start to get that multiplier effect. So we've looked at how to free up our time already using a single task server. Using multiple, we can run multiple tasks through here, and as soon as one finishes, it's going to generate the next one in the queue and just grab that. So at any time, if we've got things that are available as far as tasks to do, we can process these in parallel and ultimately give you more tasks done in less time. So let's shift gears just a little bit and let's talk about that information. So let's talk a little bit about data sheets. So there's different terms. They may be called cut sheets, data sheets. You may have other terms that you use for that. Ultimately, what this does is allow us to take that information and use it in very meaningful ways. Let me tell you a quick story. So one of the last projects that I worked on was a 10,000 room hospital. Out of this, we had to generate a room data sheet. And this data sheet represents the room, some information about that, the type of equipment that's inside of there, and a small snapshot with a key plan. It took myself and one other person 2 months of solid work to be able to get this out. Everything from being able to do exports, taking the data, doing into manipulating graphics, and doing these in a layout type of program to be able to put this. And ultimately, our deliverable was 2 binders, 8.5 by 11 of every single room in this project. We knew after day 1 that it was no longer in sync with the project. It was a best guess approximation. And after 2 months of work, there's no way we could trust that data to say that it was truly correct. One of the things that Clarity does is to generate this as a task. It makes it very quick, very easy, and it's customizable. It allows us to be able to do room, furniture, equipment, and about 17 other categories to be able to work with. And if you're making use of external databases, maybe you got an interiors department or facilities management department, you can use Clarity to connect right inside of here as well with those, taking advantage of being able to go between Revit, your external databases, and merge those two to be able to work. Now, there's multiple roles. So when we talk about this data, I want to make sure that you understand this information is very secure, and it is role-based as well as project-based. So there are global roles. There's an administrator, there's a project coordinator. On projects, once a person is clicked to be able to have access inside of here, and you can do this by logging into Clarity, you could do this by uploading a spreadsheet or a large sheet of information, or you can tie in by using Active Directory from Microsoft. You assign the level of permission, and then that person now has access inside of here. Now there's 2 other roles. There's something here called a web editor and a change request editor. That information, like we saw for the data sheet, we can enable editing for assigned users. That is the people that we want to give permission inside of here to be able to web edit. We can track that information all the way through with a log, and we can go through an approval process or rejection. And that will now push that information back to Revit as well as synchronize to Clarity. So we now have the ability to do web editing. This is a pretty standard room data sheet like we have here on the bottom left. 2 types of edit that we look at. The first is the general request. Something like this might be manual detail or notational change. So for example, if I wanted to say add an additional single door to the south wall for entry to room 116, I could do that right inside of here. Or maybe we want to do something different where we want to do an automatic parameter data change. So for example, I might take the floor finish here or the wall finish and update that information. So we can fill that information out, and that change request is going to get submitted. So as I fill the information itself out, if it's a straightforward change like I'm changing a parameter, it's going to push that back, and inside of Revit, that person who has the coordinator role, and that was that user role that we saw under the global section earlier, under here you can see if you want to keep that information, you can say accept, you can reject. You can also sort this by user and multiple roles or ways underneath here. You can also, because this is modal, you can click and jump around inside of Revit, continue working, review what's being done. Or if it's one of the manual changes, such as remove one of the tables here or add an additional operating table, you can now put that information, review that that piece has been done or verify, and then accept that. And of course, it's trackable all the way through. We can look back at all the ones in the past history that we had, as well as being able to look at any pending ones that are out there before they're reviewed. All right, so I'm logged into Clarity, and what I can do inside of here is I'm using just a browser to be able to access this. If you're making use of the Clarity product or you're making use of Clarity Connect, the interface is still the same. It's a web page giving you access to a project dashboard. For me, I've got one project that I'm currently working in, that's the LaGrange hosted. I'm logged in as administrator, so that gives me a little bit more information here across the top. I've got users, companies, tasks, server information. If you're not an administrator, you'll only see the information over here to the side to be able to navigate through the project. So one of the things I can do is I can see that most recently we had the architectural model that was modified. I can view that information down inside of here. I can start seeing a little bit more context about how this project is put together. So from that dashboard, I can see most recent history. I can look back at all the versions that were done inside of there. I can sort and group this information as I need to using this data grid. I can also look at DWF files that have been generated. I can look at PDF files. I can look at images, as well as other files or exports that were generated for me. So one of the things that I want to talk about is going to be, how do we get some of these other tasks or these items here done? And we mentioned the word task when we talked about automation earlier. Now, we talked about there being 3 ways that we can run a task. Here, I'm just going to do one where we generate this piece, and this is what I call on demand. It means when we need it, we just say run this task. So if I wanted to update the PDF for Clarity E1, the sheet set, I select that, go ahead and say launch, and now that task is going to be processed. My computer's free. Revit's still sitting here. I can continue working if I wanted to work inside of here. I can do something a little bit more meaningful and just wait until this task is done. Now you can turn on notifications and other items for that. So for example, I'm going to say, let's edit this project for just a moment, and I'm going to drill down and look at the tasks specific to this particular project. So I'll say manage tasks under here. Now I can see that there's one task that's running. That's this one right here. It'll give me an idea of about how long this task we expect that piece to be able to take. I can also look back at all completed tasks that were recently ran for this project, and I can go in and also set up tasks themselves. So for example, when I say set up a task, what I mean by that is I can look at what it takes to be able to create this task. This is some general information here across the top. We're giving it a name, how it should be applied, a level of priority. So if something is really important, if one project or one of these tasks is more important than others, you can have it jump that standard queue and kind of get that front of the line access. Well, we talked about being able to schedule a task earlier. We said you can do it immediate. That is when someone saves or synchronizes to central. It can be timed like we have here. So right now, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 4:45 in the morning, this task is going to run for us. Or it can just be none, which just means on demand when you need that to be able to click that. Down below is some further information. We can say, should this piece be launchable? Should this be an administrator task only? One of the things you may want is something like the backup. You may not want the standard users to have access to that, but it's likely that you're going to want to have tasks available for people to run. If you need that, just select it, as well as email notifications. So when this task itself runs, when it completes, if it's successful, send me an email, let me know what's going on. Or if there's any kind of an error or issue, send that piece to me as well. Down below, you can further define more information, and this is what changes based on the type of task that you have selected. But it's some pretty common information. If I went back to set up tasks, I could now go down here and see others. Well, we do have a couple of things. One is I could say, let's create a new task. If I wanted to generate a new GBXML, I could select that and then just say new task, fill in that information and choose how I'd like to run that. You can also do things like copying from a project. So if another project or a template project is set up and it has all the types of tasks that you want, you could just copy those pieces right over. So very quickly be able to get to that. So now our task is continuing to wrap up and finish. We can see that this task is, it's taking about 36 seconds longer than what we had estimated, but it's going to be complete here in just a moment. I can drill down inside of here at any point if I want to see more information about this, the last time these types of tasks were run, how long we think this piece is going to last. So we can always jump back into here, look at the logs, sort and group that information, but ultimately that task is complete for me. That piece continues to run, frees me up. So let's talk a little bit about some of the information. So I'm going to drill down here to reports. Now reports give us a very interesting way to be able to look at Clarity itself, and more importantly is the data inside of there. A lot of times in your Revit model, that data can be trapped, meaning that you can only display it in certain ways that something like a schedule is going to permit you to be able to do. Well, we've got this really vast data-rich model to be able to start working with. So I can start doing a little bit more with that. So I could take something like, say, like a door schedule, for example. This is going to look very similar to a door schedule inside of Revit, except I'm able to start sorting, grouping, grabbing this information. And if I'm not a Revit user, all I have to do is log right inside of here. If I'm more comfortable doing something in Excel or looking at this data, I don't have to go through any special requesting permissions to be able to do this. I can simply say export. Now this is a one direction, which means it's not going to mess anybody else up with anything. It's not going to change anything in the Revit model. We'll get to data editing here in just a little bit. But I can start seeing other things in here that make this a little more meaningful. So I can start sorting by model, showing me what things are linked inside of here. Or maybe I want to start looking at like revision information. So on some of the Navy projects I've worked in the past, we had things called a back reference, and you had to understand anywhere that these references were used, you had to list that, or a detail were listed, and show what sheets they were on. So for example, we can see that, in this particular revision here, it's on S1-1, S1-2, Sketch 56, and Sketch 57. So it helps to give me a little bit more information and understanding of what's there. Well, I can do this for quite a few other things, something like room contents, for example. I can sort this by room, and in my dropdown, we're level-based aware, we're phase-based aware. Your models, you may have rooms broken up and spread between more than one model. You may have equipment that's in more than one model. You may have furniture that's in more than one model. Clarity takes all that information, aggregates it together, and starts showing us how this information is used in context. So here I can look at all the doors, all the electrical pieces, all the furniture, lighting devices, and so on. Now the reports that we have inside of here, these are customizable. We ship with several out of the box. You can delete these, you can add to these, and more importantly is you can create your own and customize it just for the type of data that you want to use inside of here. Now as we start talking about data, I want to jump over to data sheets. Now I mentioned this particular bit earlier that if I were to look at, say, the room, for example, in this room I can see this information here. It's available to me to be able to start working with. I can see quickly in the 101 catering kitchen here, I get a quick snapshot. I can see square footage information about this. If I drill down, I can see a key plan. I can see equipment, doors, and any furniture that's associated with that. I can say select room here, and I can expand this and say, let's show me over here in 103, and let's view that information. So I see a little bit more information about that. And I can also see related departments. Now, if you don't want to shade the related departments, that's just one setting. Every look inside of this data sheet is customizable. It's HTML, so you can simply say what parameter you'd like to display or show inside of here at the time, and it's going to automatically fill that piece in when it's there. If for some reason that information is not there or something needs to be edited, if you've been given permission as a user to be able to do web editing, you'll have access to this button inside of here. So for example, I could say, let's edit this data. And for me, I want to come down here and say, let's do a wall. And we'll start with this section here. So I found my wall information, and I'll say, we could do a general request. And this is, something like a general notation like we talked about earlier. Or for me to actually edit that information, I can come right down inside of here and I'll say, let's take that north wall and we'll say, instead of taupe, let's make this, firestorm red. Once we've got that, and any other data that's inside of here, you can adjust and edit. You can control the types of data that's in here and the look of that information if you're an administrator. And since I'm an administrator, I have the settings tab here. So I can make things like giving it drop-down information, or maybe they're just a sequence that we want these to be able to display or show in, or maybe some things are going to be hidden, or maybe we just want to make things a checkbox, a combo box, or an image URL. So when this piece is run, it's going to replace that with an image that's appropriate for, or maybe we pull from an interiors database. So this is enough for me to be able to start working with. Let me take my edit piece here since I switched to that. And we'll say Firestorm Red. That gives us what we want. And because I'm doing this inside of here, the moment that I hit save, it's just going to ask me updated wall finish. And I'll be able to save that information out just like it is here. So that change request has been submitted. You'll notice here that it gives me a quick warning. So when I'm looking at this, or if I happen to go back to my data sheet itself, so if I jump back inside of here and say, let's go to room, I can see one pending change request down here below. All right, so inside of this location here, if I were to switch this over here to our room 103 that we just edited, view that information, it's gonna let me know the moment that I start looking at this data sheet, what needs to be adjusted, any pending changes that might be there. Ultimately, it's just letting me know that, hey, this data may not be in sync. So what's happened here is I've got a pending change request. So the system's smart enough to be able to alert me. It's going to let me be able to know this information. Of course, I can view printable, batch this information, create sheet sets, or subdivide. Maybe I only want to show by a particular department as part of my deliverable, and so on. You can generate all that right from this location. But I want to track this back down through the entire kind of workflow process. So let me select data sheets here, and I'll say, let's view change requests. So I can see that there's one existing change request, who generated this particular one, and what that finish is. In this case, it's pretty straightforward. We just changed one parameter value to another. Back in the Revit side, and I'm going to open Revit here for just a moment. On the Clarity tab, we've got this option here for change requests. If I select change request, it's going to bring this piece up. It's going to let me know that I can sort this, by user, by category, by room number, or by number. And it's going to show that to me. If I were to pick down inside of here, it'll take me directly to that room so I can see more information. So it's modal. I can stick this, right to the side and continue working or adjusting inside of Revit. For me, I'm just going to go ahead and accept that piece. Say okay with that. It's going to let me know that's every change, and we do need to synchronize this piece back to central. So for me, I'll just say synchronize to central, give it a quick little note here, and we'll say okay with that. It's synchronizing that piece back to central. Once we do that, we just round trip that information all the way back for us to be able to work with. So there's a task that's going to run inside of here as soon as that piece synchronizes back to central. It just updates the database, and then that change request, we would now be able to look down inside of here and view all the way back from any previous one that was submitted. We can view that information, and it's trackable. I can see who submitted it, how that piece was done, what those edits were, all the way anywhere along there. Now we've got other things that we can do with those data sheets. We can start, in fact, let me jump back to data sheets here. I'll show you a little bit what I mean by that. So things like furniture, for example. All right, so let's take a look at some of the furniture information. So if I were to switch this cabinet file drawer to, say, this chair student room, the second option here for me to be able to look at, I can see what's changed, right? So we've got an image that's updated. This is pulling from my interiors database. I can see the distribution and see that I've got 5 total chairs through the entire project. This is in room 146, 144, 143, 142, and 109. If I wanted to jump to that particular room, it's going to take me to that data sheet. From here, now I can see other information or other furniture that's associated with that. So I've got one piece of furniture here that is a chair. I've got another chair inside of this location, and I've got that cabinet by Steelcase available for me to be able to work with. Now, this key plant is also interactive. So if I wanted to look or click at another room, I don't just have to use that drop down. So we can switch back and forth between any of these types of data sheets. The ones that ship here, there's a few to get you started. These are easily customizable, and you can add to this list as much as you need to for the categories that are available. And this is something that you would tend to set up the first time, and you kind of never need to set that piece again. You can just continue using that. Clarity. Now I'll cover one piece here with this other piece called a project map. And project map allows us to be able to get an understanding of how are all of these models brought together. So if we've got multiple models, some may be loaded, unloaded, we might have some CAD files, keynotes, DWF files, decals. We can see what their relationships are to each other, how they're brought together and linked, which ones may be loaded or unloaded, and get a better understanding of the project as a whole. Or maybe we'll find some other files that we weren't expecting down inside of here to be able to start working with. So that's some of the information we have for that. Now what I'll do is I'm going to look back here at this next part and talk about some of the general tasks. So if I looked under tasks, this is an administrative option. I can see that that Revit DB export that I mentioned earlier has already kicked off. It's processing this in the background, and it's basically taking that change log when we took that change request from the web edit, and it's pushing that piece back through the Clarity system. So here we're just taking that and pushing it back through the Clarity system itself with this task. This was an automatic one that kicked off. What I want to point out here is we can view the current task, we can see all the completed tasks, we can do task setup just like we saw earlier. You can view if you've got multiple task servers inside of there, and there's also this item here called a task timeline. And a task timeline is a great way to be able to look at this and think of your task almost like you would for a Gantt chart. So one of our customers runs about 700 tasks a night. And for them, being able to know where they have availability to be able to push some of these tasks through. So I'm going to expand this and go full screen for just a moment. Is I can look at this and say, hey, you know what? Between about 6 a.m. and about 2 p.m., I can start running tasks inside of here. Or I might have this other small window at about 4:30 to 5:30. I've got that 1 hour. So maybe I can push a task in there. It's also nice to look at this from a load balancing perspective, because if we're running 700 tasks and now we need to run 800, 900, 1,000, on up from there, at some point we'll probably want to add some other task servers. We can use this as a quick way to look back at any 24-hour past history point to be able to get to that. And when we start looking at all those different projects, we also have things like being able to do a project query. And a project query for us allows us to be able to select multiple projects. And so where something like this is going to be useful is you may look back at 5 recent projects, for example, a hospital, And if you want to compare room information, and in particular operating room, maybe you can see what square footages are between these or some other characteristics. This is how you can start using this multi-project query to be able to return real definable results very quickly. And all of this is done without having to have any Revit knowledge to be able to work with that. All right, so let's jump back over. So we've talked about Clarity, the base product, and everything we talked about is inside of that. Now, when you have a need for a collaborative solution, that's where this thing called Clarity Connect allows you to be able to do a little bit more. And with this, consultants and clients have immediate, up-to-date access to data, automated exports, and more, all while being secure and accessible, and only to those who should have access. So let me back up just a little bit and talk about what is Revit Server, because this is something that we take as that base piece and we start building on top of it, extending. So Revit Server is the server component for Revit architecture, structure, and MEP from Autodesk. And it expands the Revit work sharing function, allowing ultimately designers to be able to work on the same project. So this is really meant to be, one firm with multiple locations. So Revit Server is that base foundation. So we give you tools to manage and monitor the host of the accelerators. We make it very easy to provide secure access for multi-office, multi-firm, as well as give access for non-Revit users. And we give project level security inside of Revit. So for example here, down at the bottom, I can see that I only have access to seeing this one project under the projects folder called Grange. Even though the rest of those are there, whether I access it from inside of the Clarity web browser or inside of Revit, I'm only going to see what I have explicit permission to be able to see. So for example, for me to give access to these other two projects, it's as simple as adjusting the level of permission. In my case, I could say, give this user standard level access. Inside of here is a project role. And now back in Revit, as well as the Clarity browser, this is what they'll see to be able to work with. And now they can continue to run. And all this is run inside of your organization, right? It's your hardware or your virtual machines or your servers, or if you're making use of cloud hosting, it's you hosting that in the cloud. So when we talk about the IMAGINiT Clarity line of products, the base is Clarity, and it's designed to automate tasks such as printing, exporting, data sharing, data sheet generation, and more. In addition, it frees information contained in that building information model for reports and data sheets that can be viewed and edited by assigned project participants, regardless of their Revit knowledge or their skill level. When you have a need for collaboration features, that's where Clarity Connect comes in. And it builds upon the IMAGINiT Clarity functionality and extends Revit Server to be able to give secure project level sharing, collaboration for multi-office and multiple firms. And everything that we've done today works not just on your desktop or your notebook computers. It also works on your mobile phones and your tablets, giving you access in the office, the field, whenever you need that. When we start looking at how these pieces compare, here's a quick overview. So you can always start with Clarity, work your way up to Clarity Connect. When you have a need for more projects or for multiple central hosts, now you can extend that with Clarity Connect, the full version. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, please visit our website at imaginit.com/clarity. Thank you very much for your time, and look forward to talking with you more again soon.